Attention! Oh no! Here we go!
Can I persuade you to join us for a drink? It's a tradition.
Here.
Jar Jar, homie, my main man, quickly. Before the Separatists attack, get into the escape pod.
Hey! This is escape, then we're the pod.
Welcome back to Star Wars Escape Pod. And finally, we got around to reviewing Star Wars Brotherhood. We've got a few voices on the show today, which we're stoked to reintroduce AJ, good friend of mine, joining us back on. It's been a while since we had him. And Blake, of course, your co-host. And finally, we got Bryce returning to the show. So let's chat Star Wars Brotherhood with them.
Another happy landing.
The Clone Wars have erupted. Caught off guard and quickly expanding conflict, the overwhelmed Jedi Order has rushed the advancement of Padawans to better integrate into the Grand Army of the Republic and assist the war effort. Newly promoted Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker is increasingly torn between his growing duties to the Republic and his secret marriage to Senator Amidala of Naboo. With his knighting, his mentor Obi-Wan Kenobi has been elevated to the Jedi Council under the rank of Jedi Master. As dark forces push the Jedi further toward their transformation of the Guardians into soldiers, Anakin and Obi-Wan find themselves on equal footing, yet opposing paths, each wondering the meaning of peace and justice during a time of war. That was perfectly well timed, if I say so myself.
Yeah, well done. That was great. It felt like I was watching Clone Wars.
Yeah, I thought you were playing a recording.
That's
Which will come first? Obi-Wan's. Which will come first? Anakin's romance or Obi-Wan's bromance?
Torn between two worlds. What will Anakin decide?
That's totally the vibes I got from this book. I don't know about you guys, but reading this book, I was like, dang, I feel the Clone Wars voices in my head as I'm going page to page like this, and it was fantastic. It was definitely, it made its way to the top 10 Star Wars books I would recommend as an essential read for anyone going through the canon. But what are some of you guys' initial impressions on this?
It was like one of the first times that since in a while since I ended up listening to the audiobook, and it was like I haven't listened to many Star Wars audiobooks, but like there were parts that I literally got chills. Like when I like envisioned it specifically, like the very end of the book when there's just when they're just reintroducing like Anakin and Obi-Wan coming through the mist with the lightsabers, and I was like, this is like cool. So classic, and it had like the music, and I could just envision it, and I was like, man, what a like. I don't know. It was just like this classic Anakin and Obi-Wan adventure, and it made them seem so heroic and such like a great duo. Mm-hmm. Did a great job.
Oh yeah, that's
so true.
Great.
It reminded me so much of just all the books that came out before Disney purchased Lucasfilm, right? It was that cool throwback, and there was a moment I know that hit me when I was like halfway through, and I felt this weird like feeling like I haven't read something that was from this era in like so long. Like, I felt like I should be reading something from the original trilogy.
Yeah,
that's all we've gotten for 10 years.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. This was a great look into the past and a reminder of all those old Jedi Quest books and Jedi Apprentice and It's like an era of scholastic books that has almost been long forgotten by the new generation of Star Wars fans, and this was a great callback to all of that stuff. But yeah, AJ, what was your initial thoughts on this?
Yeah, it was definitely our heartstring puller. It definitely was written with more emotion than other books that I've read recently. So that was just great to be able to see how um, Obi-Wan and Anakin were both internally struggling and how well they were able to just mesh and work together
Mm-hmm.
to get the job done. So that was kind of great because everyone likes to put people on podiums or whatever and say, this guy's perfect. But once reading this book, you can actually get an inside snapshot of what they're thinking and their struggles that they have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was super cool. I really liked just all the doubt that he really got from Obi-Wan with his training of Anakin, not knowing if he did it right, because
Yeah.
they really got into how Obi-Wan was trying to teach Anakin to be like a perfect Jedi, trying to be a perfect Jedi example of what he thought it should be, and then he was questioning like after now that their apprenticeship is finished, maybe he should have been more similar to how Qui-Gon was, right? More like kind of free flowing.
Yeah, he starts noticing that Anakin's picked up, Qui-Gon's traits, and he's like, "Man,
Yeah.
Qui-Gon really made an impression on this kid, even though he knew him for like a week."
Yeah,
Yeah, it's crazy.
yeah,
Right? So,
yeah. That's a great point. There was actually something in there was a few times in the book that comes up. But did you guys notice that they subtly mentioned a few times that Anakin's monotone voice?
No, not specifically. Do you
well, I
got a
mean, in
quote?
the audiobook, the guy tried to do his best job.
So in chapter 2 is the first time it comes up, but it periodically kind of comes up whenever he's talking to the Jedi Masters. And there was one little line here which said, if he had been speaking, his voice would have reverted to the formal monotone
Yeah,
that he always
okay.
used around the Elder Jedi. So I
yeah.
thought
At
that
the
was
same time, referring to Padme as well. Her
yeah,
chance to speak.
it was right. It was just kind of a nice little nod to just the way that portrayal came off in the films, right?
No, I want to mention that too because I thought he did such a good job at like at exactly what you mentioned was like kind of he did a really good job at describing the mannerisms of like the not just like the characters but the actors and how they portrayed the characters in the films. Like when they first learn of the bombing, he kind of describes Obi-Wan as he puts his hand over his mouth, and we all know what that looks like when he kind of like half covers his mouth in that way that Obi-Wan
Anakin's
looks.
the father, isn't he?
Yeah, just and like he has so many of those like those little things that you would never like think about, but
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
you hear it described and you can picture it perfectly.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There was another thing that I really loved about this. I loved the tale of the Sun Dragon, and it was a bit of a parable for how Anakin's heart is and how it's different to the other Jedi, which also affects a lot of his mannerisms. But did you guys have any thoughts on the Sun Dragon tale?
I remember that it was something that his mother had originally taught him, right? And she used it as several examples for like for encouragement as well as for like disciplinary action. It was always kind of the same story through a different lens.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know.
I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Like she describes it as like this dragon's heart is so hot, right? That it can as long as like it can outshine and outburn like anything, and as long as Anakin cares enough, he's saying that like as long as I have like the heart of a sun dragon, I can care about something so much I will always have the power to like protect it or save it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's also like a pretty cool like foreshadowing thing too, because it's like, oh, what's the when I got thinking about it, I'm like, okay, well, what's the only way I could like stop this like sun dragon with this like crazy flaming heart? The only way to do it is like extinguish the heart, right? And it's exactly what happens. You know, this like when the Sun Dragon's heart kind of goes away, like when Padme dies, like exactly like the Emperor does. You know, I don't know. I just
No,
I thought
you're
it was a
definitely you're
cool way.
definitely onto something. That's kind of why I bring it up
Yeah.
because the heart of the Sun Dragon represents kind of this glowing, this super bright point within Anakin that this Jedi that we're introduced to, this youngling, has the ability to kind of see that inside of him, and it
Yeah.
really represents his love for Padme, and she knows that if that gets extinguished, she knows that something bad would happen, right?
Yeah.
And so at the very end of the book, she says to him that she says, you don't always need to be the Sun Dragon, and
Yeah.
and I was like, oh shoot, like that's it's just a different way of Yoda kind of telling him to train himself to let go of everything that he fears to lose in the movie, because that's exactly what happens is he's so afraid to lose Padme and to undergo that sense of loss that he does absolutely anything he can to protect her, right, and to protect that thing that he holds so dear to his heart, which is what his mom would refer to as the Sun Dragon. So I loved the parable quite a lot, and it came up through the book very frequently. So I thought that was great.
It's almost a
writing.
lesson that it's almost a lesson that a lot of people can learn too. You know, we all know someone like that like they try so hard. Eventually they just burn themselves out.
Right. Yeah.
And it's almost like you have to remind this person like, yo, like you can do stuff for yourself. Like you got to take care of, like you can make, like you can almost like you can if you want something, you can move in that direction too. Like you don't always have to be like thinking of other people and like yeah. So I think in a lot of ways she's telling Anakin like you can live your own life too. You don't always have to be like trying to like provide service for other people in a way.
Yeah, it was so great, and something about that is I think it originated from the Revenge of the Sith novelization. That's what I was reading about, and Mike Shen, who's the author of this novel, is such a huge fan of the novelization for Revenge of the Sith that he made quite a few little links between this book and that, and I believe the Sun Dragon is one of them. So. Dexter Jetster played an interesting part in this book as a contact of Obi-Wan's, which helped out in the story. Yeah, I mean, I thought that was kind of cool because we never saw Dexter again unless you read the old EU Legends books, the Scholastic Fate of the Jedi, or the Last of the Jedi, where Obi-Wan is trying to survive after the Purge, and he shows up in that, I believe. But it's kind of cool to see that Obi-Wan falls back on him again, in a time of need, and it just felt very consistent.
Yeah, and I felt like it made the interaction between them in Clone Wars make more sense. Sorry, Attack of the Clones make much more sense. Because to me, it was always weird that he, like this one time, he goes to this weird person in a diner, and you're led to believe they have some background, but that's kind of it, and it never really shows up ever again. So it really kind of filled in the background where this is where Obi-Wan goes for information for anything that's in the kind of like the underground networks. It's like,
Right. He said something really interesting about.
sorry, and that's specifically because Dexter used to be an informant for people, so he was kind of the guy in the know in the underworld kind of era.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely an interesting story there, which I would love to see come up. And yeah, I never actually. I still need to finish this book, but does anyone here know if he popped up in Master and Apprentice, the Qui-Gon Obi-Wan novel?
I don't think he did.
I don't know.
Take that as an.
Did those come out after Attack of the Clones?
This one is a canon novel as well, which came out like maybe 2 years ago, and it was about it was about a young Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon before Phantom Menace. But I got my brain was I was like, oh, did Dexter have a name drop in that book? Like I was trying to rack my brain, like trying to remember, because I read half of it and then I dropped off for a while, and then I got to go and reread it. But He said something really interesting. Was that she used to call you Ben for some reason. Dex said with one of his hearty chuckles. He's referring to Satine. I thought it was really interesting that Satine
What?
is actually the first one that called him Ben. I always thought it was the Clone Wars episode where Obi-Wan goes undercover as Racco Hardeen, goes to the prison, disguised as this bounty hunter kind of guy. And it turns out that he used his codename Ben because that's just the nickname that Satine gave him. But that was really
Oh.
fascinating to me. I don't know about you guys, but I was like, oh, that was cool.
Yeah, that kind of went past me. I didn't know that happened in the book.
Yeah. AJ, you're stewing over there. What are you thinking about?
Oh, just about how Dexter has popped up in Queen's Shadow and Queen's Hope. The
Oh yeah,
Padme
you read all
series.
those books. Yeah, that's right. Yes.
So I was just trying to think of where he got name dropped in there.
Oh, interesting. Okay. All right. Well, that's good to know. I haven't read those books personally, so but that's not the only connection that they made between this book and the Queen's trilogy. Would you care to enlighten us all on? Well, first of all, there was a subtle reference to the mission that Sabe took to Tatooine in a quest to free the enslaved that were there, and I thought that was like a subtle Queen's trilogy reference as well. But there was also a mention to a character called Sister. Would you like to enlighten us on Sister?
Yeah, Sister's a transgender clone trooper who first popped up in I think it's the first book of the Padme series. I'm blanking on the name. But anyways, she popped up, and it was interesting to see how they have how Disney has tried to um, show a different character in the fact of like a transgender character, because they're more there's a lot more people that are um, transgender out there. So this way they have a character that they can actually relate to. So I thought it was really cool that they just kind of gave a nod to them. But now that she's come up twice, I'm kind of hoping that they aren't going to turn Sister into kind of the token transgender clone that's
Okay,
ever
this is
gonna
just the
be-
one character, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because a lot of people just like having their token person out there, and just always just bring it up saying, "Oh, we haven't forgotten about you," but we kind of have because we don't expand on anything. So now I really think if they want to continue with that they should kind of have more of like a deeper understanding of who Sister is and how she kind of became to be, and like what's her backstory, what does she do, where does she fit in this? Um,
I must say
because
it
they
was
just
pretty just out of the left field. Just like this character showed up, I was quite confused. But yeah, it wasn't until you mentioned that she had originated in the Queen's books that then I was like, oh, okay.
What was her role in the Queen's books? Was she just
um,
mentioned, or?
yeah, she was pretty much just mentioned in the Queen's book. They didn't really get into much background of her. Just kind of mentioned, oh, here's a clone trooper that's helping out, and she's transgender, and that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
There wasn't really
Right.
much on her.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree. Like they should do something with the character now, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's gonna feel like a pretty hollow gesture.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like with
It's interesting though.
Yeah.
Sabe and her mission to free the slaves. They've
Yeah.
mentioned it now twice in two different books, but they don't actually do anything with it. So now they've kind of set themselves up for, okay, we've hinted at this twice. Now, is there going to be a Sabe book that comes out just to kind of explain her mission and how critical that is?
Maybe there will be a Sabe book because she's popped up in a bunch of the Marvel comics from my understanding, and some of the Darth Vader
Yeah.
comics, like the Queen's Double, right? So Yeah, maybe we'll see more of her. There was a really fascinating story because she's the one that Keira Knightley plays in Phantom Menace. So there was a really fascinating like comic where she's all aged up, but Padme's gone, and she's actually like one part of this like little rebel cell that Vader has to fight, and spares her life and stuff, and it makes you just wonder like what he's thinking, like what goes through his head, seeing a doppelganger of Padme, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's a good comic.
yeah, it was
It's the one
such
where
a
they're
great comic. Yeah,
it's like the loyalists, right? And they're guarding Padme's tomb.
yeah, that's the one. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
such
it's
a
really
good
good.
one. There's a lot of politics in this book, which I actually really liked because again,
it's so good.
backstory, context, it's great. There was a really good reference in chapter 6, and it said the way that this war started, it's not just the violence, it's the bad faith and disinformation, misrepresentation under the mask of independence. And that's what they
Yeah, that
used
was
to
super
describe the
cool.
Separatist Alliance, and I thought that was so good. Yeah, just
Yeah,
amazing
and
quote.
maybe this isn't exactly what you're getting at, but that this also reminded me that throughout the novel, something would happen, and then when it finally hits the hollow net, like it's all obscured or reversed to like push an agenda,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
like because
Captures
that's all
the news.
politics too, right? Like it's
Right.
pretty. I thought it was very. I guess it's very fitting to Palpatine to be that schemy, even like on that level.
Yeah,
So like if you're not there, you don't get the truth. Like it's been filtered in a very
Yeah.
specific manner.
It's super real, right? Like it's such a like a I don't know, like a realist take on an actual like war that could happen and does happen like on Earth, where you never do know. And I don't think the book even answers who started it, right? Like
right.
No,
it
you're
it,
just
gi- it
left to
gives
think it's a third party. That's it, because there was
yeah, there's
proof
very
of both.
strong hints either way. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that because a part of me thinks it's kind of even more interesting if the Republic did do it, right? And
Yeah,
there's a high chance they did do it in a way, to
sent
frame
in the
separate.
commandos.
Yeah. So
Did you guys catch the reference to the 2D Clone Wars, the micro series? There was a few dropped in
yes,
there.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's I only caught one, maybe if there's just one, but it's when Anakin's talking about how good of a fighter Mace Windu was, and he
Yeah.
mentions
Yeah,
that he
yeah,
was
I
like
noticed that.
killing tens of thousands of
Yeah.
super battle droids on Dantooine. right?
Yeah.
I was like, oh,
Yeah, I was like, oh, dude, that's from the old animated series.
it is, yeah,
Yeah.
it was.
That's awesome. The
There-
Gendy cartoons.
There was
man.
another one because that's the volume 1, I think it is. The classic
Oh, and,
volume
and
1.
Grievous, right?
Yes, there was one.
Was wounded.
Yeah,
by
there was one
Grievous.
to Grievous as well.
Yeah.
Kiadi-Mundi
Oh,
tended to
yeah.
his fingers and leaned forward, scars healing across his cheek from his recent encounter with General Grievous.
Super cool.
Oh,
Yeah,
see, I remember that part of the book, but I didn't realize that was a reference.
yeah. It was a reference to his fight, because I think in the 2D series he does get like a scratch kind of across the
Yeah,
across
I
the
think
cheek.
that's the fight with the what's that guy's name?
Shaggy.
Shaggy, yeah, the
Yeah.
Shaggy Jedi. Scooby Doo and Shaggy. Thank you. That's exactly the name I was looking for.
The one that gets
Like,
pancaked into the ground.
Let's get out of here.
exactly.
Hey, Master Mundi, we gotta go.
Just get stepped on.
Yeah.
You want some snacks, Scoob?
You want some chewy snacks?
Well, that's it then. I guess it's canon.
Yeah. I'll mention the politics again. Like it made it feel like we got to know the Clone Wars a bit more than how it's usually portrayed, which is just like it's always about Jedi leading troops into battle and like fighting droids, right? This was such a cool like investigation. There we had a lot more like Jedi going to deliver like supplies and medical stuff to planets that had, been part of a recent battle, and it's more like kind of helping them deal with like that kind of level of destruction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love all the politics kind of behind it, and all the sentiment. Obi-Wan, everyone is kind of questioning. It's like, man, feels kind of weird that were being integrated into the military, right? Like there's
Yes.
a lot of that.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
one thing to add on top of that is in chapter 7 though there was a little moment where Mace says that the Chancellor had put in a request to prepare Padawans for the field, and Obi-Wan is
Yeah.
like, Padawans for the military, and
Yeah.
and unaware that Palpatine asked for such a thing, and I thought that was such a great kind of also a reference to why Ahsoka is so young and naive and thrown into the chaos of Christophsis at the start of the Clone Wars as well. But just a very great reason as to why so many of these unprepared Jedi are now stepping into the position that they are. There was also a Clone Wars episode with Kit Fisto's very aggressively naive Padawan who becomes a knight, and he's like ready to prove himself against Grievous, and then Grievous just kills him.
Yeah,
And
that's who I was thinking of too. Is the
Yeah.
Mon Calamari Jedi?
I was like, yeah, there's a lot of Jedi that just get promoted purely for the sake of the military, for the
Yeah, for the
politics that have
position,
shoved
yeah.
them into that position. And yeah, it was just like such a great reference to that, because that's kind of what the war is built on, is Palpatine kind of fishing these Jedi in as the best people to lead the clones with all their wisdom and knowledge, and he kind of paints the picture in this deceivingly likable way that kind of goes like, oh yeah, like every senator in the Republic is like, yeah, they are the best guys to lead the army because they know what they're doing. Like they handled the situation on Geonosis really well. They've got the diplomatic side of them that they can lead the troops and kind of give, I don't know, like it just brings a lot more to the battlefield, I guess, right? And the Jedi are
it
like,
makes sense
"What?"
on paper,
Yeah.
but as we know, that also just causes the Jedi themselves to become somewhat corrupt and intertwined in the war.
Well,
Yeah, he makes them choose a side, right?
Yeah,
Like,
and after
it's-
1,000
they're not. He stops them from
Peacekeepers.
being servants of the galaxy, and he makes them servants of the Republic, which
Yes,
is like very
yes, exactly.
like,
Right, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
which no
'Cause-
longer means they're really like in the middle
Neutral.
anymore. Yeah, they're not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, after 1,000 years of peace in the Republic, they've kind of been slowly ingrained into the system, right? And it's become part. They've become part of the system almost so intensely that that the head of the Jedi Order and the Chancellor kind of work in cohesion. And we've seen this before in the High Republic books. They do work as a team at that point as well. And it's almost those events in the High Republic that even like bring it closer together, because while the galaxy is expanding at that time and the Republic is trying to expand to the outer regions, the Chancellor needs the Jedi to be those diplomatic people, right? So I think that's where the relationship starts to grow, and what we're going to see in the High Republic is like that kind of merge point where we finally get to Phantom Menace, and it's like, oh yeah, they're now like, side by side kind of thing. It just sets up the playing field so well for Palpatine when he swoops in and snags the chair, right? It's like, hey, everything's ready to go. All we need to do is start a war and get these guys in the front, and then have everyone shoot from behind, kind of thing. Ventress is introduced in this book. Really great introduction, because in canon we've never actually seen how that happens. She's just kind of thrown into the show, and it's like, oh, what came before? Because the show is like months later after the Battle of Geonosis, and there's like a huge gap there. So this book really should have started with this, but this book's like slots in that gap like really nicely. And there could even be like a second and third to this like as a sequel to this book, and I would love to read a second and third book to Brotherhood, but it would also like bridge that gap really well if they ever decided to do that. So did you guys have any thoughts on Ventress and her introduction?
So different than the Gandhi cartoon.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, because in that, I think Josh, you and I were talking about it, and it's really just she's trained by Dooku, and then Palpatine asked her to go assassinate Anakin, and that's basically it.
She's a very no pun intended 2-dimensional character, and like really just shows up to just kill Anakin, and it's like, okay, well, she tried, failed, and all right, on to the next villain. And then Grievous comes in, right? And
she's just like a no one that just shows up and is like fighting all these weird monsters in an arena.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. She's like, yeah, she's just kind of like a wannabe Jedi. Like there's no backstory or anything. And in the EU, it was kind of fleshed out a little bit, but in the canon, in the Clone Wars, they did fill in her backstory, like you know, the fact that she lost her Jedi Master, stranded on a planet, and then she fell into the clutches of Dooku and all that stuff. They gave her a really great ending, and Dark Disciple is one of the best Star Wars books I've ever read. But we still never found that introduction moment. And I've always wondered, like, what does that look like? Like, when does Anakin get his scar? And all these things. And maybe there will be a sequel to this book where that story's told because, you know, spoilers, like, that doesn't actually happen in this book.
Yeah.
But
It's
yeah,
gotta
I thought that
happen
was
at
great.
some point, though.
Yeah, yeah.
It was really great. Her introduction was subtle but really effective.
Yes.
Right? Like you definitely, even when she wasn't, you know, part of the story, you could almost feel her presence like throughout the book. Like you know, even when it's talking about like other people going on, you can almost envision her like sneaking through the shadows. She's like doing all her own stuff, like subverting Obi-Wan in like a lot of ways, even if she isn't like directly called out, which is I think a very venturous move, especially in that kind of position where she's just subverting the Jedi. Yeah, I feel like that fits her character really well.
And I think this is the first time, maybe Josh, you can correct me, but this is the first time we've really followed a story with her that where she was still working with Dooku, the Separatists, where she wasn't just a warrior, right? Because she was kind of a politician in this. Like
she was more, yeah, she played more of the diplomatic side until she kind of revealed herself to the Jedi. But yeah, I mean, it is one of the few times that's happened because in the show, which is more action based, you know, we always saw her swinging a lightsaber pretty much at every point, right? So, yeah, this was a very unique perspective to be introduced to the character, and certainly nothing like the 2D micro series. So, there was a hologram appearance by Duchess Satine Cries of Mandalore, and on the appearance, she proclaims Mandalore's neutrality, which is a huge plot point in this whole book of planets, whether or not they should be neutral in this war, whether or not is it effective to prevent the war from spreading, and obviously Satine being such a big part of Obi-Wan's life, he remembers his time with her here and there throughout the book. What did you guys think of Satine and her references? Was there any that popped out to any of you?
I thought
I
it
wish
was.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I say I enjoyed that. It really, like, from Obi-Wan's perspective, while you're in his head, it really helped him connect with his take on Anakin, and as he's kind of unraveling what's happening with Padme, sorry,
Right.
where he's maybe that's why he's a little too lenient about the whole thing, because he knows that he went through this himself.
Yeah.
I wish I knew a little bit more about like their, like, does it explain how they met and like how that started?
Yeah, I think I forget if it was in this book or if it was in the Clone Wars show, but basically Obi-Wan had been assigned to protect Satine while him and Qui-Gon were on a mission at one point, very much like Anakin and Padme,
Yeah,
you know.
same thing.
Yeah, and they kind of fell in love with each other, and we know that Obi-Wan would have left the Jedi Order if she had said the word, and they decided to stick to their duties and kind of just keep apart, kind of thing. And now we're at a bit of a crossroads where him playing the diplomat in this situation has put him in a very difficult position because he's not only there to initially he doesn't show up there so he's there to investigate, but he's also kind of there to represent the Republic and kind of poke them to say, hey, we're worth siding with, kind of thing, right? Like we know that you're slowly he kind of like understands the relationship between the Trade Federation and Nemoidia a lot better, and as to us as readers as well. But it was a really interesting getting into his head about where he stood on Satine's grounds of neutrality and how he disagreed with it, even though he's kind of a Jedi and is supposed to be kind of the neutral guy in a lot of respects, in a lot of these situations, right? So there was a really cool bit with Anakin, subtle mention to Kitster. Hashtag where's Kitster? I mean, now we found him in the pages of this book. There's a little moment where he's remembering all these people, and what I thought was really cool about that is there was a, I noted down that he mentions that he went for like walks and had breakfasts and stuff with Palpatine, and he's kind of like remembering all these people of his life and stuff like that. But what a way to deepen the relationship between him and Palpatine, just like having breakfast with him and stuff
Going
like
for
that.
brunch.
Yeah, going for brunches. I was like, this is
You like to join me for eggs and toast?
He's like
Anakin,
he's
tomorrow.
like force lightning the bacon.
Yeah, like cooking the bacon.
Anakin's not picking up on it. He's like, what a useful
Anakin's
power.
like, oh wow, you cooked that so fast. How did you do that?
Yeah, no, cool little nods there, deepening his relationships with all these people that we've come to know through the films. The initial meeting between Kenobi and Ventress was really civil, because like she is playing a diplomat and stuff like that. Super civil, really well kept, and kind of added a little bit to the mutual respect that they have later, because she is still the same person who saves him from Maul and his brother, from getting like killed on their ship, right? So, there's definitely this kind of a genuine respect between the two of them, and how they meet, I think, plays a lot into that relationship. So it was really a big thing for this book to kind of play off of that.
That was another one of those scenes that had really good mannerisms and like the descriptions of
Yes.
how they were talking to each other and their like facial expressions was really on point.
Right.
Yeah, I noticed that too. Where like, as opposed to most novels, like it was really specific with the mannerisms, like how it was worded.
Yeah. Yeah.
You could not notice it because like, oh, it's just so out of the ordinary for novels.
Right.
I think a couple times he mentions how Palpatine would say something, and it's almost like he didn't have a smile and like a smirk on his face, but like he like he described it as like he was internally like smirking or grinning, when he the way he would talk.
It was like he notices like a quick smirk that vanishes quickly.
Yeah, stuff like that was really good.
Yeah, really good.
Okay, I hate to bring it back, but I'm gonna post a picture in the guest chat of the Discord.
Okay.
Because I was looking up Kitster on Wikipedia, and I found a thing that he is in Star Wars Galaxies, and I did not know.
What? He's in Star Wars Galaxies?
What?
The picture blew me away. Can you guys describe how Kitster has aged?
I want to say he looks a bit like oh my goodness. What? There's no way that's him.
You gotta
He's in
describe to
early-
people
He's
what you're
Kitster
seeing.
joined a early 2000s punk band. He decides to have the same outfit as
Marty McFly.
Nelson from The Simpsons.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Anyways, this kind of shocked me. You'll have to look it up yourself if you're listening from home.
Yeah.
It's right on the legends in Wikipedia. He pretty much looks like he has a blue purple tinge to his skin. Maybe he's got into some death sticks or
spice.
something. The years have not been kind to him.
So good.
Anyways,
High chance he's still in Tatooine. I'll say that.
yeah.
Bring it back up. Thank you for that, Bryce.
No worries.
That's
Like
amazing.
I would have died if I couldn't share that.
Oh man. Going back to Palpatine, there was this really, really important like moment where he's just at the right place at the right time. This guy. I mean, whenever Anakin needs, whenever Anakin needs a shoulder to lean on, he's just there. You know, at the
Yeah.
just like sneakily kind of
Slithering in.
yeah, slithering into the right moment, right? Finally, Anakin is free of his master's watchful eye, right? Like, because he's no longer Obi-Wan's apprentice anymore, he's got more time to freely kind of groom the boy, as he likes to do, as Maul describes it, right? And now that he's his own Jedi Knight and stuff like that, you know, he can freely kind of grab Anakin whenever he wants, and no one needs to know, kind of thing. So he says, has anything troubled you lately? We haven't had a time to discuss the happenings on Geonosis. And he takes a sip from his tea, and he says, how fast life changes these days. They get into his time on Tatooine. And even before Anakin can tell Obi-Wan all this stuff, he discloses to the Chancellor how the Tuskens took his mother and how they took her life, so he took theirs. And it was just a really great reference to Revenge of the Sith when Palpatine says, "Remember what you told me of your mother and the Sand People?" And yeah.
I love that subtle, like,
No.
I just thought it was such a great call, like just a great Easter egg to that moment in the movie. He's a passionate, loving, caring person who's driven by hate. That he's been told that he can't feel, right? But he feels it anyways because he knows and loves his mother, and it was taken from him, and drives him to do the thing he does.
It's a really good moment because Palpatine, he like reinforces that Anakin kind of did a good thing in that moment. He's just like, he's like, oh, and yeah, you punish them as they should have been, right?
Yes,
it's only,
yes,
it's only he's like, it's only nature, yeah, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because
cool.
the Jedi distanced themselves from their feelings, so it's not like you'd get Obi-Wan or Mace Windu or Yoda coming up to you and say like, "How are you?" Like, like it wouldn't happen, right? And Anakin is a very heartful person. Like, he needs someone to ask him how he's doing. So Padme and Palpatine are the escape for him, right? And that's part of the reason I think why, I need him. When Mace Windu is about to kill the guy, it's so much easier to believe that he's not just saving the guy's life because he has this ability that he claims to save Padme, right? He's saving him because that's his friend, and it's actually one of the few people in the galaxy that he's ever been able to confide in and trust. And he says that to Obi-Wan when he's asked to spy on the Chancellor, and this is what really pushes him away from the Order. And this book did such a great job at positioning them up together as friends, right? As like genuine friends.
And it feels like that, right? Like like usually, like Palpatine is, don't get me wrong, he's just the king of gaslighting Anakin. He knows everything that's going on. And he's almost every sentence is just to get Anakin to feel a certain way or to get him like he doesn't actually need to ask any of these questions. He's just stringing him along, right? But when he does answer Anakin in that like scenario, he feels just like a regular old guy. He's like, yeah, it makes sense to me. Like,
right.
Yeah.
No, exactly.
Right. And I think Anakin, like, it makes, like, I would trust him too if I was like feeling that emotional and being like, oh, nice, this guy's not judging me at all. Like, oh my god, I'm gonna talk to this guy again.
Absolutely.
It just feels like wise words from someone, right?
Yeah, well, it was interesting because it even says, like, in his head he knew that the Chancellor would almost validate his decision to kill the Tuskens. Just in the way that he responds and everything. It's actually noted in the book that Anakin knows that Palpatine understands him in a way that the Jedi can't, and that's why he goes to him, right? And that's why he keeps going back to him. So very very great way to position Palpatine in this book. Did anything stick out to you guys with Palpatine other than that moment?
I really liked his speech to the Republic and how he uses the events of the book to justify bringing the Jedi into the military. Almost kind of backfires kind of what Obi-Wan was kind of aiming to do. Like he's just like, I kind of want to like de-escalate, but
try to end the war the whole time.
In showing how effective him and Anakin were on Catanomoidia, it kind of justified Palpatine to make that big speech, and it was really good of how he's gonna bring the Jedi into the military with like the cheers of all the people after he's like showing footage of like Anakin just like killing, like, destroying battle droids, right? And everyone's like,
yeah. Anakin painted as the war hero, right? And Anakin likes it because Anakin's got quite the ego, as what we've come to realize from the show, right? From the Clone Wars, and here it is with Palpatine like feeding that, right? And he also said really, really interestingly, he uses Shmi's words kind of to feed him, right? He says, you care, Anakin. You have an immense heart. Don't let the Jedi take it from you. Your heart makes you a better person. It makes you a stronger person. So he's like feeding all these things that the Jedi would never say to him in order to kind of pull him away from that, right? And he also says, like, as the younglings grow into Padawans, they must feel comfortable around clones. And I was like, oh my goodness, like this guy, right? Just like trying to set up
everything,
to set up like
maybe,
Order 66.
Maybe this is a good time to mention just the horrible babysitting that Anakin has to do with the younglings, and how the entire time, you're thinking the whole part of the book, right? Like, show us your lightsaber moves, Anakin.
Yeah, do a flip. Oh, so cool. What's funny is that was every like 6 to 8 year old's opinion of watching the prequel movies. The same thing. Oh, the lightsabers.
It's like it painted the younglings as just like any Star Wars fan would like behave around a real Jedi or whatever, right? It's kind of funny. They make them all like fanboys and girls instead of just like young little Jedi. Yeah. Whereas in like Attack of the Clones, it's totally not the idea that I had. When Obi-Wan walks into the room with Yoda like talking to the younglings, like, hello, Master Obi-Wan Kenobi. Like, hello.
Yeah, they should redo it in the style of this, where he walks in and some kid just goes, "You're old." Okay. Yeah. I have some questions, Master Yoda. Show us a flip.
Kids are just screaming and running around. You just can't control them. All like the training lightsabers.
At one point in the book, Obi-Wan starts to realize why him and Anakin need each other, and why while he sits imprisoned on Cato Nemoidia, because at some point in the story he gets captured, and I just thought it was such a great little moment, because it's moments like this that really define why the book is titled Brotherhood, because in Attack of the Clones, the relationship between them is like father and son. And you start watching the Clone Wars, it's like, oh, these guys are like behaving as they would in Revenge of the Sith, but where did that relationship come from? Where did this close friendship bond of a brotherhood, come from, right? And
that's so disjointed from Attack of the Clones, where it just feels like Obi-Wan is constantly scolding Anakin like a bad child.
Yeah. So I mean, AJ, you haven't said anything for a while, but like, what did you think about all the little subtle moments that they slowly bridged these characters together in a new way?
Yeah, it really humanized them, as to not just be like I've said, the kind of like a hero and like up on a podium, but like they're just like a regular person. They have their own struggles, but they've also got that innate knowledge of the other person and what they would do. So they're really a great balance to each other. Anakin with his aggressiveness, let's go out, swing the lightsaber, win the day. Obi-Wan, okay, let's maybe stop, think about this plan, and then try and do it, like negotiate or that kind of thing. And then just how great they are together, where they're both doing stuff but able still be aggressive and kind of negotiate, but not like as far as they would have gone themselves. It was just really nice to kind of see the balance between the two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There was go ahead, Bryce.
Yeah, I was gonna I like there's a part where Yeah, there's a lot of parts where like Obi-Wan has to restrain himself, right? Because he's realizing that Anakin's no longer his charge. Especially like there's a part where he runs into Anakin. Anakin's like watching pod racing, like eating soup and like watching pod racing, right? And Anakin like quickly like switches it off.
Yeah, he
with
like
the
hacked
Force,
the holo
Yeah.
TV or whatever to play the sports channel.
Yeah. And Obi-Wan's just like, man, like it's fine. Like go ahead. Like, you're
Yeah,
not,
like- Oh,
you
Anakin,
can do
how
whatever
much?
you want.
How many hours during your study time have you been watching the pod races?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, the other part where, Anakin has influence over Obi-Wan, right? And the way, and like you think that like as the older person, he's kind of only passing on like traits to Anakin, but Anakin also influences Obi-Wan in a way where even though Obi-Wan's so straight and narrow, Anakin convinces him, to take that like hacked comm link. Obi-Wan's just like, I don't know about this, but it does sound pretty useful, like,
Yeah.
right?
Like, come on,
and
Master.
Of course, it gets him in
Backfires.
trouble. Of course, it does, right? I mean, I think that's like a really like that scene is a really good kind of playful moment between them, where I can kind of see like the rowdy younger brother kind of convincing.
Yeah,
the
yeah, and he's
straight
so
and narrow older
convincing
one
about it too.
to-
He's like, well, technically, I'm not on the council, and I'm gonna be off world, so I mean,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, he's like, I'm following all the rules. Like,
yeah.
yeah.
That's so good.
Those are the two scenes that stand out to me. I don't know if you guys can think of any more. I'm sure there's lots.
Those are some pretty good ones. I mean, I remember a few times where Obi-Wan throughout the book kind of thinks, "Oh, what would Anakin do?" And
Yeah.
that's also kind of a big part of how they kind of grow into this really great dynamic, because in Attack of the Clones, like, you get the sense that they don't really belong together. Like they're kind of rough,
they butt heads
right?
a lot.
Yeah, there's no synergy going on like there was with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. Whereas the Master and Apprentice book that we had kind of actually painted an opposite picture of that, where I remember Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon weren't actually getting along for some time, much like Anakin and Obi-Wan did in Attack of the Clones. And now this book is kind of bridging that gap, like we mentioned before. So yeah, very cool to see all these little moments that kind of make that happen. There was a really interesting part here, which I kind of referenced the lines, just George's script in because Attack of the Clones gets so much flack for the
gosh.
script, right? So there was
I think I know what this is.
I just had to read this. All right. So it seemed a lifetime ago, though it had been far more
Yeah.
recent. And while he now cringed at some of the things he'd said during those idyllic
Yeah.
moments, the way words had tumbled out of his mouth without proper social graces or any sensible filter, he wouldn't trade any of it. And that's in reference to Anakin's lines, what he says to Padme and
Yeah,
stuff on
yeah.
Naboo and all that. Yeah, I thought that was just a great little addition, because
There's another one that's similar to that. There's another throwback to Attack of the Clones.
yeah, there is. Yeah, there's a
Or
whole bunch.
He's referring to his robotic arm, his hand, and like he's complaining because sand just keeps getting in it, and he's just getting
Yeah.
sand everywhere. He's like,
That's right. That's right.
That's
He's
so
like getting
good.
into his gloves.
That's a great reference though as well, because Attack of the Clones is the only time we see him without a glove on his hand, and then thereafter he wears a glove all the time over the arm. So
He's almost embarrassed of it.
I mean, it's kind of a part of him, and the book makes a reference to Padme not caring at all about it, right? Like, because
But he's self-conscious about her thinking about it.
right, he is, yeah. And the sand thing though got to me a lot, because it came up I think once or twice, like you mentioned, and I was like, oh, maybe he actually wears a glove because it would get around that issue, right? Like there's braces on the glove to kind of keep it locked in place. So I would imagine maybe that's why he ends up putting one on, right? But yeah, great point to bring up there.
And another thing I loved about the robotic hand with Anakin is at the beginning, he's like always tweaking with it, fiddling with it, because it's like, this isn't right. This doesn't feel right.
Mm-hmm.
So he hasn't fully accepted that the robotic hand is a part of him. But
Mm-hmm.
then closer at the end of the book, he's now using his hand properly, like
Yeah.
just smoothly, and like he's like, okay, now I finally have accepted that this has happened, and that this is now a part of me. So it's like
Yeah.
using the glove, the sand, and like how it gets in all the joints and all that, kind of really shown us how Anakin has grown even throughout this couple of weeks or whatever that this mission has taken place in, and have come to finally accept the robotic hand.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wonder if that's something that like real life people with amputees kind of have to go through too.
I would think
I
so.
don't know.
Yeah.
I can only kind of speculate, but
Mm-hmm.
it seems to me
I
like
could totally see that being
yeah.
the case, though.
Right.
On top of that, though, there's also like because AJ, what you're referencing is also it's connected to his lightsaber style because he's saying like 'cause the robotic hand is too slow, but it's also too strong. And it's neat towards the end where he decides to just use the robotic hand and just use raw power because that also leads into what he does when he becomes Vader.
Yeah, it also kind of changes things up with his lightsaber style being very different in Revenge of the Sith compared to what it is in Attack of the Clones. And I think in the EU there was some sort of kind of reference or story point somewhere where he changes his focus on which form he studies as far as how he fights, right? Because I think at one point he was, as a Padawan, he was either leaning one direction or the other. One of them being, with the two
Yeah,
two
akimbo.
lightsabers. Yeah, and then he ends up going towards what is it, Dijem So or something afterwards, which is just like kind of more on the aggressive end of fighting stance.
Yeah, but still single-handed.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So yeah, that was definitely a great mention towards that for sure. And I love how it had something to do with his robotic hand. It really makes a lot of sense, right? Because as Vader gets all his robotic limbs, it becomes even more so based on his power
Yeah.
and not so much of his speed. So, yeah, great way to weave that in. There was something here, but let me see. Oh, Mill has a force ability. Mill is a Jedi youngling that shows up in this book, who ends up tagging along with Anakin on his mission to kind of rescue Obi-Wan from his situation in Nemoidia. And she's got a force ability to sense and visualize pain in other people, and it makes her an empathetic Jedi. And that was a very unique kind of thing that has never been done before. But
Yes, this was a new power.
yeah, what did you guys think of that? It's not every day we get a new force power popping up.
It's true.
I really like the addition of Mill. She was like the yin to the yang of Anakin. Almost like to me it was almost like a what if, like what Anakin might have been, like someone who cares so much that, she literally can't even
Yeah,
think about violence.
it's almost like what he
right?
could be, I guess, if he wasn't
Yeah.
a possessive love, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and she cares so much that she decides that she doesn't want to be a Jedi because it's like,
Yeah.
she realizes that that's not like how she's going to help people.
It's a bit like
So
Ahsoka too. Ahsoka decides that she can do more, along the lines of actually helping people rather than swinging a lightsaber around and fighting for the Jedi, because she realized when she talked to those two sisters in the underworld, like just how much they'd lost at the casualty of the Jedi hunting down Zero, and it was like, oh shoot, like there's people out there, like we're fighting a war, but there's actually like we're fighting for these people, and we haven't even turned an eye towards them this whole time.
Yeah, and you're causing harm while trying to help them, right?
Yeah.
So,
I thought she was such a good addition to the book. Like in my opinion, she's like almost one of the most true forms of a Jedi that you can get. Like the fact that I thought it was awesome. I really liked her. I hope she pops up again somewhere.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely.
she was also a female Zabrak,
Yes.
which I don't know if we've had that. Has that been
We have had that, yeah.
canonized?
Yeah, there was a
'Cause
bounty
It always
hunter.
gets weird to me with the Night Sisters because it almost feels like Zabrak are the males and the Night Sisters are the females.
So Zabraks weren't originally from Dathomir, right? So there's like a section of Zabraks that are kind of, I guess they were captured, enslaved, and kind of self-bred on Dathomir as slaves to the Night sisters,
sisters.
you know, society.
Mhm.
But yeah, Zabrix are actually native to a different world, and I think that world was actually mentioned in this book. And I'm just blanking on the name of it now. But there was a
Iridona.
Iridonia. Yes, thank you, Iridonia. Yeah, Iridonia. There was a bounty hunter in Clone Wars that was a Zabrix who showed up a few times in Clone Wars, and one of them was one of the ones in the Seven Samurai episode where Anakin and Obi-Wan and Ahsoka have to defend that village with the farmers. She was the one with the ship that gets them out of there, and she was one of the people that helps them out. So,
Okay.
yeah. Zabrix are just like a species like any other. Yeah, they're not exclusively male.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to
East Koth is,
reproduce.
is a Zabrix.
Yeah,
He's on
yeah.
the council, right?
Yeah, that's right. He's
Yeah,
also a
Dragon-
Zabrix. Yeah.
Dragon Kolar.
So the ones on Dathomir
Yeah.
are like yellow and red and orange, and then the ones that come from Iridonia are still like these like more kind
Like
of
brown beige
skin tones. Yeah, more fleshy tones. Yeah, yeah. You mentioned something while we were reading the book. Something about Nemoidians and Cad Bane species.
Oh yeah, so
Oh.
I didn't realize that Nemoidians and Duros shared a common ancestor.
Yeah,
so
they're an offshoot.
they look really similar, which I never really noticed before.
Yeah, so it's a bit like that. It's a bit like that, where the Zabrix are kind of, there's like an offshoot of them, which is the Dathomirian Zabrix. So, there was a really great description of how the dark side is in this book, and I don't know if you guys got chills when you listened or read this, but I thought it was really great. The normal sense of flow that came with connecting to the Force felt dissonant here, interrupted, chaotic, blocked. An unexpected fight required to get through the thick cloak draped over it. The dark side. It's such great imagery because the veil of the dark side prevents those from the light from seeing, right? And that's something that was like a reference to Phantom Menace. And then much like the apple of Eden would reveal knowledge, would come with a cost, right? And Yoda describes the dark side of how it can like take hold of one's destiny and just like dominate them, right? And there was a moment where Obi-Wan kind of considers like what would it be like if he had turned to the dark side, and like would that veil be lifted? And so much like how Dooku discovers the ugly truth of the Senate, discovering, dipping into the dark side, discovering the truth behind that, it consumes him, right? And his lust for greater power also feeds into that. So it was really great imagery, like with all of this stuff, like just like kind of painting a picture as to like what the dark side is, in the realms of like the Force users, right? And I guess
really interesting.
how that veil works,
That makes me wonder if that's what happened to Ponkrell.
I think so.
Because he
I
kind of
think so.
figures
Yeah.
that all out, right?
Yeah, because he has a vision, right? And it's that vision that kind of enables him to push for greater understanding, and it's that which kind of gets to him and almost creates a dark Jedi out of him, right? And I think Dooku is no different to that. I think he's also just a victim of realizing that there is no escape from whatever this is that's growing, this shadow that's growing over the galaxy. And in his own twisted way, he thinks, because he even says to Obi-Wan, like, he says, "Join me, we can destroy the Sith." Like, he's offering Obi-Wan to join him and kill Palpatine, right? But
Now,
naturally,
we're not left knowing if that's the truth or not, but knowing what we know about Darth Tyrannus, like, it's plausible, right?
oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's what he was
Like, I
kind of
believe
training
it.
Ventress for until Sidious said, "You got to get rid of her. She's getting too powerful."
Yeah.
And he puts up a protest to that until he's like, "Okay, yes, I will do your bidding." And then he,
Yeah, it's interesting though. Like,
It
I
is
would
so
love to
good.
know if that from his perspective, because I don't think we've ever seen from Count Dooku's perspective on that exact topic during the war, if he had always planned to overthrow Palpatine and actually try to bring peace.
right,
Well, he's a Sith, so it's always a possibility, right? Like,
yeah, it opened up a lot of
even if all Sith are gonna want to kill their master at some point,
Yeah.
whether or not he wants to do it for good or not. I bet you, in the same way that Darth Vader talks to Luke about killing Emperor Palpatine, right?
Mhm.
I think Count Dooku probably talks to Obi-Wan in the same way, thinking that maybe he'll even turn Obi-Wan to the dark side in the process or something like that.
Yeah.
And Anakin says that to Padme as well in Episode 3.
Yeah, it's the understanding, knowing that he's going to possibly lose someone that's close to him, and it's that heart of the Sun Dragon which allows him to fall victim to that veil, right? He's tempted over that line, and the knowledge of knowing that there is a chance that he can save his wife. He goes on to that other side of the dark side, and that's what twists him, right? And that's how Yoda describes it too. Twisted by the dark side, young Skywalker has become. So all of these little bits and pieces have really kind of piled on top of each other to create this greater understanding of how the dark side works in Star Wars, and I just really loved how it was portrayed in that paragraph. Yeah, there was. Did any of you guys have anything so far that you want to bring up that I haven't touched on so far?
Just the one thing being maybe the two other kind of main characters, the two Nemoidian guard characters.
Oh yeah.
Roog and a whiny guy. I forgot his name. Tachen.
Tehen or something. Yeah, Tehei or something. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what your guys' thoughts were about them.
I liked them a lot. I thought they were pretty good characters. We've never really, aside from Newt Gunray, we've never had a protagonist Nemoidian before. It's one of those
You
really.
consider Newt Gunray a protagonist?
Sorry, antagonist. Sorry, we've never had a protagonist. We've only had an antagonist. Is what I meant to say.
You separatist scum.
You separatist scum. But yeah, no, they were great characters. I thought
it was also
painted...
cool. Yeah, just seeing Nemoidians that weren't part of the Trade Federation.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the closest we got was on Mustafar. There's two royal guards.
Yep.
Like Nemoidian guards. That's it. They're just in the background once, and that's it.
Yeah.
So I thought that was super cool, seeing that side of it, and also just learning a lot more about their culture or whatever as a people. Because it's funny that they took the fans' perspective of the race, which is their businessmen, and making it that's the Republic's opinion of them, and they consider that to be kind of racist.
Right.
Yeah, I think it also is a really great way to show that this civil war that's happening is happening for a reason. And is that I think there maybe is a lot of discrimination and unfair treatment that's happening in the Republic, right? I think that resentment and that unstable kind of thing that's rotting in the Republic was there. It's always there, right? It was there for a long time. It was just Count Dooku's the spark that kind of ignites it. And I think it does show that there is a huge problem in the Republic, and there's not just Republic good, Separatist bad. I think it adds a lot of depth to it.
Corruption.
There was some really interesting stuff about Qui-Gon in this book, because as we know from Dave Filoni, Qui-Gon is part of the reason why it's called Duel of Fates, because it's the fate of Anakin Skywalker. And there was a little bit which said Obi-Wan and Anakin were forever bound by something without rules or obligations, something intangible yet powerful and fragile, the fate that Qui-Gon Jinn had in each of them. And finally, after so many years of self-doubt and petty gripes, Obi-Wan found himself starting to truly recognize Qui-Gon's faith in Anakin. And it's Anakin's faith in Mill that allows Obi-Wan to see that Qui-Gon had that same type of faith for Anakin, and he believes that he's the key to saving the galaxy, just as Anakin believes that Mill's ability and who Mill is able to be a very key part in completing their mission, even though Obi-Wan doesn't see or understand that right away, right? What did you guys think of that, and how Qui-Gon's influence is kind of portrayed throughout the book?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think Obi-Wan realizes that Anakin is kind of teaching Mill like Qui-Gon taught Obi-Wan, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's completely answering your question or not, but
Yeah, no, I just thought it was kind of an interesting one to pose because you know it comes up a few times. You know, Qui-Gon's name drop, and you know, obviously having just seen Obi-Wan Kenobi, you know, he's Obi-Wan's master, right? He's played such an influence in the guy's life, and he's in 50% of the novel. And finally, when Obi-Wan comes to terms of like who he is in the show, he's finally able to see Qui-Gon through the Force. And I don't know. I just thought it was a really important thing to mention that it's something that Obi Wan finally understands, like why
yeah,
Qui Gon believed Anakin to be the chosen one, and that's why Obi Wan believes it so heartedly that when Anakin is lying on the burning rocks of Mustafar, that he like screams out at the top of his lungs as if he believed it too. And it's not his opinion, right? Like it's Qui Gon's opinion. And you watch two movies later, and it's like, when did Obi Wan believe this? Like he was so half heartedly, like he took Anakin on as a final death wish of Qui Gon's, not because he wanted to. And
They considered it more of an oath than anything
yeah,
else.
yeah, and Mace Windu obviously has no faith that Anakin is suitable to be a Jedi, and that's very apparent through the course of this book as well. But I just thought it was very cool that Qui Gon's influence and that his faith in Anakin is like very statedly kind of put is like he is the chosen one, right? And this book makes a point of proving that to Obi-Wan, saying like, well, if Anakin can have faith in Mill, you know, maybe I can have faith in Anakin, right? And that's also what strengthens their bond, you know, as brothers, right?
I think
There's
Mill
a
has
lot of that.
a lot of the traits of Qui-Gon too. Like,
Yeah, I noticed that as well.
Yeah,
right, Mill is the one that kind of sees
yeah,
through
very
whatever is
empathetic,
happening and makes the decision to leave
Yeah.
the order, just like Qui-Gon almost did, right?
right?
Um, yeah, it seems like a lot of the more gifted Jedi at like, I don't know, like more independent thinking, they kind of see through it. They kind of see through
Through the dogma and just that
yeah.
the Jedi orders become too political and is missing the mark from what they were originally intended to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
4 words: Jedi Military Integration Act. We saw an official label for what that is in this book, which I'd never heard before, and it's a political bill that gets passed to officiate Jedi into the military, like as official generals, right? And this book was the one to do it. And I thought that was such a great key moment for why this book just made so much sense. You know, why the politics of this book were just so great, because it was able to tell that story. And it's a story that hasn't been told yet. Like it's all just been assumptions so far. It's like, oh, well, the Jedi did a good job on Geonosis. Maybe they should just keep doing it, right? But this is a system, right? Like this is a big working machine, and you know, it's also not the sequels. So you know, we're actually getting context for all this stuff, and I love how like the Jedi Military Integration Act is that context. It's like that it's like, yeah, there was like an actual thing that we had to sit down and agree upon to make happen, and this is why all the rest of this stuff is able to happen as well, right? And yeah, just really
Vote
great.
now, vote now,
Yeah.
vote now.
Oh, now, I mean, you know, bring on the politics. You know, without politics, there's no war.
Right?
I do feel like I need a bit more, you know, like story behind how that actually happened, because in the end, who has to sign off on that? Yoda.
Mm-hmm.
Is someone that wise? Like, I guess maybe Yoda doesn't have, like, you could say it's the council's decision, right? But
Yeah.
it seems really tough to me that all these Jedi are gonna sign up for something called the Jedi Military Integration Act, like that has so much like awful, like evil context to it that I'd be like, okay, I need even more information on how this would happen, unless like it seems like a lot.
Right.
Yeah, like the only thing I can think of is maybe their thoughts are by helping the war initiative, they can bring it to an end faster.
That's exactly it. Yeah, he paints it in this
For
light
sure. Well,
that
for
like
sure,
it
yeah.
looks good, right? Like that's Palpatine's whole thing. He makes it looks good, but he's really got other intentions, and you know, definitely uses the Jedi as like, oh yeah, all their abilities, all their wisdom and knowledge and everything will bring a swift end to the war, and bring peace for the galaxy, right? So of course people are going to be in favor of that, right? So I mean,
Yeah, I just feel like in real politics they'd call it something different, like the clone leadership training camp or something like make it sound a bit more wholesome, but like
Yeah. The new Jedi deal.
yeah.
It's just a label.
And then
It's
you
just
look-
like it's not really
and then,
like
yeah, and then eventually someone will look into it and be like, "What the heck?
Wait a
They're sending
minute."
these guys into the war? Oh my gosh!" You know, and it'd come out
Exactly.
and there'd be.
I
Yeah.
thought this was about environmental protection.
This is why all the bills we have are called like Bill C7. It's like who knows
Yeah,
what that
it's like-
means?
right.
Yeah.
There was actually a really cool part in this book where Obi-Wan and Anakin kind of inspect their armor paddings that
That
know
was
them.
such a good.
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
I was just gonna bring that up. Just the scene of them picking through all the armor pieces and like assembling what they're gonna look like for the beginning of the Clone Wars series. That was super cool.
Yeah, that was really well written. And there's also a visual description of like how some Jedi have already adopted the chest, shoulder, forearm, subtle changes to their tunics to accommodate the change, right?
pieces.
And the integration act of really like now they're generals, right? Like it's got to fit in now, right? Not can't be running around dressed like monks. So
Yeah, you're in the military. You gotta chop that mullet off, you hippie.
yeah,
That's right. I love they make fun of Obi-Wan's hair.
Yeah, Obi-Wan gets cleaned up, right?
yeah. I love how
Yeah.
him and Padme have this kind of thing going with Obi-Wan's hair. Bryce, did you have anything to
Yeah.
say about Anakin and Padme's
Oh
relationship?
man, I was like, do I mention it? Like,
I don't know.
did
Maybe
anyone
we
else
could,
feel like
maybe
that
we could
was weird?
skip over it. I don't know.
Anyone else feel like
Oh,
like
what the
like Padme
they
brings
got
some
down?
blankets? Like,
yeah.
like is that a thing
Let's
that
take a
Padme would
speeder
do?
to a hill.
I
They got a
don't-
back seat.
Okay, I don't know what you guys think about Padme and Anakin's relationship, but in
I-
my view of their relationship, they're not doing it.
No,
They're like very
no.
wholesome.
They're like a
They're
whole-
Yeah,
wholesome,
they're
man.
classy
They
people.
like touch hands, then they kiss maybe like once.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't want them like getting it on the back of like a pickup in an alley.
that's exactly it, right? Like, I mean, as soon as I
it's
read
like-
that chapter,
Not my Star Wars.
I read that
Yeah, it's
chapter.
like the
and
lower levels.
yeah, the
Coruscant.
Coruscant underworld, getting it on in the alleyway somewhere. I'm like, are you kidding me?
So grungy. What
Like,
is
who's
club
this
night?
for? Who's
I don't
this
know.
for?
I
Like,
don't know. I mean, one thing I did like about it though was that it's like, yeah, I guess they're two star-crossed lovers that are trying to find time to be with each other, while also trying to keep it a secret. Like, it definitely told that story very well. But I mean,
They have
yeah,
to get into the PG elements.
I'm really with you
Yeah.
there in the sense that it's like, okay, like a subtle mention of like them going back to her place or something could have been enough for me.
Yeah, and they did that as well later.
Yeah.
But yeah, the first time around.
The first time around was a bit
yeah,
rough.
star-crossed
Really make sure you
lovers,
knew.
like that was like like Shakespeare romance, and then it like slowly turned into 8 Mile. I was like,
yeah.
I was like, where did all this like
8 Mile, no,
I don't know.
100%, 8 Mile all the way.
But I don't know. Maybe some people love that stuff. Not for me. But
Final thing I want to mention that's on my list is a little subtle quote from Obi-Wan. Thank you, Commander Cody. I look forward to working with you more. And we had the introduction of Commander Cody in this book, which is kind of cool, in kind of the last few pages. Yeah, what did you guys have? Any last kind of minute things to bring up before we wrap up today?
I just
Go ahead.
I just found that like when in the Jedi Temple when Obi-Wan is watching Anakin interact with Padme, and then Gerald Teppel come up and talks to Obi-Wan with a red-haired youngling who trailed him. I just found that was kind of a neat callback to Jedi Fallen Order.
Oh yeah, that's a great
they've-
point.
oh
yeah.
my gosh!
I
Yeah.
didn't notice that either.
Yeah.
So Cal
Good
Kestis,
catch,
Cal
AJ.
Kestis making a
Yeah.
small appearance. Yeah, that's a great
Yeah.
catch. Yeah.
Really good catch, man. You're holding that the whole.
Yeah.
That was a good one, man.
He's sitting here steering
Came
with a
out
smile on his face,
swinging.
like no one's mentioned this so far.
Yeah. What a slam dunk.
Yeah. That is a good
Yeah,
one.
that's a great one.
All
I don't
right.
know. It's been a while since I've smiled as much as I did. Like, I remember I was working, and I was listening to that last scene where, Roog is trapped. She's surrounded by battle droids, and it just, like, keeps building up. You see, like, one, then two lightsabers ignite in the mist, and they're cleaving through, and you know who they are.
Yeah.
And the narrator's like, who could they be? And the music's going, oh.
So
I was just
good.
like, I, like, stopped working. I was just like, oh, like this is a lot. I gotta take a break.
Yeah, what a great finish. It almost
Yeah.
takes that good story and turns it into this, like, you always get that, like, Western kind of cowboy riding the horse into the sunset. But this was, like, the opposite. It was almost like this is the sunrise with the Jedi coming towards you out of the mist,
Yeah.
This is the
Yeah.
emergence.
Going to war.
Yeah, this is the
It was
emergence. So, yeah.
whimsical and made me feel like a kid. And
Yeah.
I really, really enjoyed it.
Awesome.
Yeah, I just hope they do more. I could do with a sequel and even make it into a trilogy leading directly into the Clone Wars. I think that'd be great.
Absolutely. Yeah. I hope Mike Shen comes back and writes Brotherhood 2 and 3, whatever they're called.
Yeah.
Fellas, it was great to have you.
Brotherhood 2, still brothers.
Fellas, it was great to have you on the show, and I guess we will all we'll catch you in the next one.
We'll see you out there. Keep flying.
All right, big thank you to all of you guys tuning in at home, and of course our participants today, AJ, Bryce, and your co-host Blake. It was great to have them on, and I'm sure we will see them all again very soon. If you like the sound of Brotherhood, if you haven't read it, maybe you just listen to this podcast to skip reading it, but I do recommend giving this a read. It did come out on May 10th, so it's been a little while since Mike Shen released this jewel to the Star Wars fans. But definitely check it out. It's worth going through it. Whether you're on audio, ebook, hardcover, softcover, whatever it is, the Clone Wars have begun kind of thing. This should be included in anyone's Clone Wars list. Absolutely essential. Definitely on my top 10 essentials, and really give it a 5-star, 5 Pablo points. That's what I would say. There's multiple ways you can follow us on social media at SW Escape Podcast, on Twitter, Instagram. Get notified about those new podcast releases. Feel free to shoot us an email, swescapepodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from you guys. If you have any reviews of your own you'd like to give us about Brotherhood and what your thoughts were, we'd love to give it a read. Or send us a voice recording to the email as well. We love hearing those voicemails. There is a link as well to a SpeakPipe address. I think it's speakpipe.com/Star Wars Escape Pod. So you can record a voicemail there as well. And as far as future content on the podcast goes, we've got a few What Happened episodes coming your way with What Happened to Saw Gerrera, Mon Mothma, and I believe we're doing another one. And I'm blanking on the name. Oh, Cassian Andor, of course, the star of the new show coming out on Disney Plus October 31st, I think it is. So make sure you stay tuned for that, as well as recent drops with the final episodes of our sub-series, Journey Through Time, taking a look back from the beginning till today about all the teaser trailers between the theatrical releases for the films, then going through the TV shows, starting with the holiday special, all the way up until Star Wars: The Clone Wars. We'll catch you all in the next one, and may the Force be with you.